In this step, as we look at the right ventricle, we'll do a V-shaped flap. Clean and locate the major features and inflow and outflow tracts. During this step, go slowly. Make sure that you're to the right of the anterior interventricular artery and cut a V-shaped flap slowly so that you don't cut across the moderator band. We've switched specimens to look at the features of the right ventricle. First, orientation. Here's the right ventricular wall. Here we have the pulmonary trunk, and in behind, the aorta. There we can just catch a little piece of the right coronary artery, so we're below that. We've cut the wall away in a V-shaped structure to fold it up and reveal several of the inside features. Now, let's look at what we've got. First of all, let's discuss the inflow. We know that that's coming in from where we just saw the blood through the tricuspid valves, which we can see a cusp of here. If we were to go back up through this, we would be in the right atrium. Now, the outflow from here is going to come down from the atrium, settle the blood very quickly, change its direction so that it shoots back up through here, getting through the pulmonary trunk. And notice how you can see these trabeculated bars of muscle down in this area, but up here it gets very smooth. That's the conus arteriosus. So the smooth component leading to the pulmonary trunk, conus arteriosus. Then we have an interventricular septum, which is this wall here, separating the left and right ventricles. And all of these trabecula carnae are going to play an important role in the complex contraction of the heart, as well as settling out the momentum that comes from the blood as it comes into the chamber so that it doesn't have to waste energy slowing that blood down and then changing its direction. Then we can see the papillary muscles, which are very nice on this one. We can see a great big anterior papillary muscle. We can see a smaller posterior papillary muscle. And then we can see here that there's some septal chorda tendineae, but aren't really coming from a papillary muscle. May actually be a little small component over here of trabeculated muscle as well. The septomarginal, or moderator band as it's otherwise known, comes off of the interventricular wall and always runs across to the base of the anterior papillary muscle. And this is going to be a specialized component of the conduction system to carry that depolarizing wave through the bundle branches to the Purkinje fibers and then to the base of the papillary muscle so that it can start its contraction. Finally, we have the chorda tendineae, which are coming off as passive structures from the papillary muscles and attaching to or tethering to the cusps of the tricuspid valve. In this step, open the left atrium between the pulmonary veins and clean any clots that remain. Then note the features. Try not to cut across the vein openings themselves. Here, from a posterior view, you can just do a little square opening. Now we're going to look at the features of the left atrium. We're going to start around at the front here with the apex, and we're going to see up towards the line just above the left circumflex vessel is the auricle, or the appendage of the left atrium. It's quite small and atretic because it doesn't have to receive the same volume. Here I've got a probe located through the superior vena cava for reference point, and all of this is atrium. As we rotate around, there we go. Now you can see here that we've got the vena cava running vertically, and here this probe is in the pulmonary veins. 4 of them, depending on where they get cut. We'll pull that out. We'll pull this out. And now we can open up the atria itself to see some of the features. Let's remind ourselves of what the features of the left atrium are. We have the inflow, which is coming from the lungs and going in through the pulmonary veins, which we've already seen. And then we have the outflow, which is going to drop down into the left ventricle through the bicuspid or mitral valve. And to see that, we're going to pull this flap down. And right here, you can see the cusps of that mitral valve right there. That's dropping into the ventricle. Then the next thing we're going to see is the auricle, which we saw from the anterior surface. And that's going to have the same things, the pectinate muscles, though it's a little less functional than it is and less important in the right. Then we have the interatrial wall. And the interatrial wall is right here. And if we pull up on that interatrial wall, in fact, I'm going to cut it with these scissors. We'll be able to really open up that wall. And this is the wall that's shared with the right atria. And what we're going to see at that point is right here, we can see a nice little valve for the foraminal valve. Right in there. Okay. In the last step, we'll look at the chamber, the left ventricle, and we'll make a cut from the apex up towards the aorta to view the semilunar valves and the coronary ostia. Now we can look at the muscular and membranous components of the septum. In this view, start towards the apex in the left chamber, and you can see how you're going to open it up in just a slight arc. Stay away from the papillary muscles, and note that you may need to cut across some of the anterior interventricular vessels. If you choose not to do that, make sure that you can see what you need to see before you do that, so that you may or may not have to, depending on the heart you have. Now we're going to look at this diseased heart to look at the features of the left ventricle. A couple of the things will be the same as what we've seen before. First of all, we want to see the inflow, which we know is coming from the bicuspid valve, from the atria. Then the outflow is going to be going up through the aorta and past the aortic semilunar valves. Let's see what we can look at. If we open this heart up, the first thing I want you to recognize is here's the thickness of the right ventricle. Compare that to the thickness of the left ventricle, and you can see clearly that they've had hypertrophy as a result of the thickening of this muscle because of the workload that this heart was under. As we open it up, now we can see cusps of the bicuspid valve right here, and then we turn it a little bit further around, open the aorta, and there you can see the cusps of the semilunar valves. Right in here is a little pocket, moon-shaped semilunar valve. And we'll back out a bit. Now we have the trabecular carnae that we saw in the ventricle on the right side along the wall, and they've been hypertrophied as well. And you can even see the papillary muscles right here are quite enlarged. And you can always identify a papillary muscle because it has the chorda tendineae coming off of them as they go to the cusps. So let's see what else we have. Anterior and posterior papillary muscle, both of which are in view here. Anterior, posterior. The chorda tendineae coming off of those towards the cusp of the bicuspid valve right in here. And then we have to look at the muscular and membranous walls of the ventricle. Remember, this one has hypertrophied in both areas. Here up top is the membranous component of the interventricular wall. And then down a little bit lower is the muscular component of the interventricular wall. Finally, let's take another look at those aortic semilunar valves to see if we can find the sinuses and nodules, and then the left and the right coronary ostia. We're going to spin way up high. Here you can see a cusp of a valve, and it has a little bump on the end of it right there and right there. Those are the nodules, and they will slap together and seal, hopefully, this valve as it goes out of the ventricle so it doesn't retrograde flow back in. At the base of each of these is the ostia for the major coronary arteries. we're going to look at this one up front, right here. And there you can see the ostia, that opening for the coronary vessel. This is the right coronary artery. And as the aorta contracts back during ventricular relaxation or diastole, then the vessels are going to fill. So the coronary vessels fill during the resting phases of the ventricles. Well, that's it for the major features of the heart. As you consider the pearls and problems of this area, there's a few that you want to keep track of. First of all, we want to preserve the phrenic nerves when you're removing the heart, and then leave the aortic arch in the body so you can connect it with the pulmonary trunk. We're going to remove the visceral pericardium and identify the surface features before making any of the windows into the chambers. Don't rush this step. We don't want you to make any cuts in the walls of the heart too quickly to avoid cutting papillary muscles and moderator bands and some of the internal features. So go carefully. And we do want you to ensure that you clean up the chambers of the heart carefully and thoroughly, making sure that you don't leave a big mess in the sinks. So make sure, for the sake of those that have to clean up after you, that you do a good job cleaning up after yourself. I'm Dr. Craig Goodmurphy. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Anatomy Guy.